All right, so I want to cover Python in Excel. It's my understanding that recently they rolled out access to this, though I think it's been released, at least in a beta, for a year or so now. Anyways, I got my hands on a copy of it, trying it out. I want to walk through some basics of what you can do with it, and then talk about some of my opinions about it. So let's dive right in, and let's take a look first. I've got a table here, and let's just say that I want to add a column to it for the amount. So I just want to multiply these two together. So first up, I'm actually going to convert this into a table. So I'll choose the choice here to format this as a table. Click OK. I could name that if I want then. And then if I want to add a new column here, I can just type amount on the right here. That'll add a new column. And now when I put a formula in, traditionally if I did an equal sign and then arrow over and select this cell, which is the price per unit times, and then arrow over and select the quantity. Traditionally, that's what a formula would look like. You can see it references the column. So no big deal there. No reason to have anything complicated like Python. However, I think this is a good way to understand how Python integration works, is to just recreate this column using Python instead. So in the next column over here, I'll call this amount pi. All right, inside of here, if I start up a formula, this time I don't want to just start typing the elements of Python code. Instead, I want to use the pi function. So this is what's been added to allow you to then insert Python code. So open this up here. You can see some things change here. First off, the cell is green now. It's got a green border and it says pi on it. That's to indicate that this is Python code that's being inserted. So basically, you can think of a formula with Python as having a formula system embedded inside of it where you type the Python code. And then when you're done, as you can see here, it says Control Enter to commit it. So I could just start out with something like 1 plus 1, and I'll get 2 then. Just hit Control Enter to evaluate that. It calculates it. All right, so you can see here the column was added. And because it's a table, it copied it down automatically. Very convenient. You can see if I click on the cell, the Python formula up here in the formula bar. So if I want to modify this and actually compute the amount, then just hit F2 like normal to edit the formula. However, you can see instead of opening it up into the formula mode, it's opened it up into the Python formula mode. And then I can get rid of the hard-coded constants of 1 plus 1. And instead now, I can just come over and, like before, I could click on a cell here. You can see it automatically inserts the lookup for that value. Hit the multiplication sign, hit the next cell over, and then just hit Control Enter, and that'll evaluate that. Make this a little bigger here. And there you go. I've got my amount calculated in Python. All right, and then a couple of things here. If you start to get multi-line Python involved, you can come up to the formula bar here, click in the formula editor, hit Control Shift and U, I believe it is. Yep, expands it out, or Command Shift U on a Mac, I believe. This will make this bigger where you can then edit the Python in a multi-line script. You can also drag to resize it, and then Control Shift U to go back to just a single line formula bar when you're done with that. And now you're not just limited to two simple values here being multiplied together. You can do anything you want with the Python and your data. And so maybe the next thing I'll do here, I'll show you, you can actually start up a new Python formula here, and you can get a reference to your entire table. So in this case, if I go ahead and just click on some part of the table, that's just a reference to the cell. If, however, I get rid of that and instead I do XL there, that's like the helper function to look up an Excel cell value. When I do that, now I can just start typing, and I believe it's called table 1. Yep, there you go. I can just hit tab to complete that. That'll complete a lookup of the table for me. When I hit Control Enter to commit that then, yes, it's warning me about where I've placed this. I've got this in the middle of the table, and based on calculation order, I need to move it. So I'm going to cancel out of doing that. I'll come down here after the table somewhere, and I'll start that back up again. Python, Excel, and then table 1, tab, Control Enter. It's busy working, and in this case, because there are multiple cells and rows that are referenced, it's an entire table, that's packaged up into what's known as a data frame, and that's from the pandas package. Basically, it's a structure that helps you work through columns and rows of data to represent them as an object and then perform calculations on top of that. Now, if you would like to see that reference, you can actually have it recreate the table over to the right here. If you click on the card here, the little pi, you can get a preview of what that reference is. You can see there is the entirety of the data frame. And in this case, if you look closely, you'll see that there are just rows with 0 to 9, and then there are columns with 0 to probably like 8 or 9 as well. So in this case, I forgot to tell that there are headers. So I'm going to hit Escape there to cancel out of that. Edit this again with F2. I believe I can just come in here and I can add headers. Yep, I can add the headers parameter, set that to true. Now when I do that, if I come back here, once that's done, click on the card again. Now when I get a preview, you can see we have the headers up on top. I can even expand this if I can drag this right here. There you go. So here is the reference. You have the various Did I not refer to the whole table? Hold on. One more thing here. I'm still a little bit new to this. I do believe you need to come here and you need to specify that you want the entirety of the table with pound all, including the headers. Yeah, and let me look at the selection. Look at the selection up above here when I modify this. When I do table 1, you can see it only selects rows 2 through 11. The header is not selected. So I need to do this, open bracket, pound, and then all, closing square bracket. Now you can see it selects the header row as well. Control Enter there. Once it's done there, now I should actually get the column values in the data frame here. If I click on this, I can see it. There you go. You can see order, customer, and what do I have? Coffee type. Okay, yep, those are the columns. And then, of course, I still have all of the rows and I have all the data. So basically, I can now perform a transformation on this table or this data frame. So how about we do something simple? How about I come down to another cell here? Actually, before I do that, you can click on this little pop-up hover menu here, and you can choose to insert a preview of this reference. You can actually then reinsert the table again. So that's another way to look at it. So you can just preview it if you want by clicking on the card here on the left, or you can actually insert it. And then as changes are made over here, like if I were to, I don't know, modify this to $50 instead, you can see this all updates on the right here. It's got busy little indicator with the arrows. Once that's done, then you can see 50 shows up right here. And so the calculation's redone, it's $100. So everything flows through. So this is an entire reference to that table, and it's a live reference or a preview, if you will. And that's what we did here by inserting this here. If I select on this preview, in the very first cell, look at the formula here. This is J14.array preview. So J14 is where I had the data frame reference at. And so I'm basically taking that cell and asking for a preview of it, an array preview of it. All right, so now if I undo that, because I want to go back to the data frame that I have, now I think I want to perform some further processing. So I could take and hit an equal sign and then pi, opening parenthesis, and then it comes into special mode. Now I can have a reference here to the data frame up above. So I can refer to the value in that cell, or I actually could have set a variable up there and I could use that down below here. In fact, why don't I do that? Because that's interesting. Let's come up here, F2. I'm going to set this to, let's call it DF, Control Enter. Now, if I come down to the next cell, because it's lower in the sheet or further to the right, the processing order is left to right, top to bottom. I can now, inside of this Python formula, I can refer to D, and if it D in there, you can see I've got completion as well. There's DF, that's the variable I created. And then I can do dot, and I think there's a group by. Yep, there you go. I can continue to type here. I get more completion. Let me show you that actually. Once you start typing, you can see you get completion. There's group by, tab to complete that. And then I don't know if you get, I don't think you could get completion with the columns. That would be nice, but group by, and then let's group by size. We'll group by the size here. And then I can do dot sum to automatically produce a summarization of it. It'll be a little table. Control Enter here. That should calculate that. And then it should show me a preview of it here in a moment. Huh, what did I do wrong here? Hold on. Oh, it's probably trying to sum on the wrong column. So what I'll do is I'll do an aggregation here. It's an automatic summarization of the columns that it thinks need to be summed. So instead of doing that, I'm actually going to, I think I have a reference over here somewhere I can use. This is going to be a separate video, by the way, but you can use the Python and Excel a different way with the Anaconda toolbox. I'm going to do a separate video about that, though, but I've got an example of this over here. I'm just going to copy and paste what I came up with here. Yeah, I'm going to use this right here, this aggregation. Okay, not that complicated. I should have been able to do that, but whatever it was. All right, so now I'm going to aggregate on the amount column, and I'll sum it up. Control Enter. All right, we get a data frame, and then I should be able to click on it to get a preview. Oh, by the way, you can do Control Shift F5 for a preview. So if you don't want to hover, Control Shift F5 gives you your preview. There you go, great. So then if I want to insert that, I can then come in here and hit Array Preview just like before. And there you go, I've got a little summary table with the sizes, large, medium, small, and the total amount that was ordered. So yeah, I think that's a good introduction to what you can do with Python and Excel. It's basically a new formula subsystem where you type in formulas within a cell. It's not so much like VB macros, where you have a separate interface where you're typing in code, and then you can interact with the sheet as if they're separate concepts. It's more like you're interacting with the formulas in the code inside of a cell. However, that said, as I mentioned, when you're editing the code up here in the formula bar, there's nothing stopping you, like over at the front here, there's nothing stopping you from having multiple lines of code. I should be able to wrap this around here, and Control-Shift-U will expand that. Control-Enter, that should work now. You do have to respect indentation in Python because that's significant. But once I do that there, oh yeah, and I've got an indentation error. I wonder if I come in a little bit more here. Nope, okay. I could do something like this though. I could do the group, could set a variable grouping equals, and then you come down here, and do grouping dot and aggregation. This should work. There you go. Get the same thing back. So you have multiple lines of code up here that you can work with. So it's actually pretty helpful to expand this down here when you're editing your formulas. So really, when it comes to the Python code, you should refer to the various documentation for, in this case, pandas. So you can come to the data frame docs and look through here, or ask ChatGPT for help. And then the one last thing I want to show you here, if I save this. Oh, I did want to mention, it took a little time to recalculate that. A couple things you can do, actually. Over in the data tab, I believe it's in the data tab. Over in the formulas tab, there's a Python section. This is where you can insert Python if you haven't done so already. And then there are some tabs for diagnostics, which you can see over on the right, where it shows me the errors. I should have pointed those out earlier, but when I had that mistake with putting the second line in with spaces, the error shows over here. And then over on the right here, you can change your calculation options. You could turn them off if you feel like it's too slow and it's taking too much time. And then you could manually invoke an update of the calculations. Either works. And then the reason I wanted to mention that it takes a little bit of time, the reason for that is, let's do this. Let's edit this here. Let's put in a mistake again. Let's just do something to mess it up. I'll do Control Enter here. Watch over on the right where the diagnostics come back. It's going to take 3 or 4 seconds at least. Okay, so that's done now. That took about 3 or 4 seconds, and that's actually pretty good. Once you get a lot of formulas, it can take more time. And the reason for that is, for whatever reason, Microsoft decided that the Python code needs to run in the cloud. They don't run it locally. They don't let you manage a Python environment locally. Now, I would hope that at some point they're going to support a local environment, because in my opinion, it's just insane that you wouldn't take advantage of your local environment. Also, in terms of security, we already have VB macros, formulas themselves. Those could both introduce a vector of compromisation. And we can always add trust in terms of what we do and don't run with Python. In fact, we already have trust inside of Notebook. So why not take advantage of all of that? And why not use something like a Docker container if you're worried about somebody setting up a Python environment correctly? Well, then either expect them to be an expert at setting up a virtual environment, which I think most people that type Python code and understand Python code can do, or maybe you could have an optional feature to integrate. If they have Docker installed locally, they could do that to run a container. And then there's no reason that you need to run this out in Azure. And so the implication of that, though, is because they're running in Azure, that costs money. And as a result of that, they only give you so much time every week. And it's pretty small right now. I don't know what it's going to be once they fully release it. But I'm actually paying for Office. I think it's like $100 a year for my plan. And for that amount of money, I only got a few hours worth of tinkering with Python and Excel, working with a handful of formulas. And somehow I already burned past my time. And as a result, I was kicked down to a standard mode where it's a lot slower. You can still continue to use the feature. It just takes a little more time to process, I guess, until the week is up and I get my new quota back that will last me for a few hours if I were going to use it again. Anyways, I think it's crazy that they're doing that. I would hope in the long term they're going to use a local install. And speaking of a local install, if I come over to my Mac, I've got Python and Excel. I've got the Anaconda toolbox, which basically is an alternative implementation of this. Much of the code is the same that you can type. So if you can do one, you can figure out the other. And this actually runs locally. It's a lot faster if I make changes. Like if I come up here to this table here and change the quantity of this to 2 laptops instead, watch how fast it calculates everything. All right, there you go. It's all updated. And that had to flow through this table here with a VLOOKUP, basically. That's what I set up here. And then it came down to my little aggregation or summary table. So it's not bad to run that locally versus running. Wow, if I actually tried to do that over here, let's come here and let's change the, what did I do? Let's change one of these to 2. And let's just watch how long that, oh, you know what I need to do? I need to update my formula and unscrew it. So I'm undoing that change I did that broke this. There we go. I'll fix that. All right. And then we'll come up here and I'll wait for that to complete so we can see the total time here. All right. Now, if I change the quantity of an item here, change that. It's calculating right now. Okay, not too bad. This is not that complicated of a formula, much less than I have over here, but I've noticed in general it's a lot faster to work with Python in a local environment. In fact, this sheet has a ton of formulas in it. I've got a formula here for the amount with Python, and that's actually used in a VLOOKUP on these 2 columns here. These 2 columns are taken from this table over here, and then this table is aggregated here. So this is a lot more to do than I had over in the other sheet, and it's still at least the same amount of time to run updates to both.